Ana de Armas sat quietly in the corner of a small, nearly empty café. Outside, rain tapped softly against the wide glass window, the kind of sound that made people want to stay inside and keep their thoughts to themselves. She was wearing a plain coat and a knitted scarf, her hair still slightly damp from the walk. To anyone passing by, she looked like just another person taking shelter from the weather. But inside, she felt different. She felt invisible. She had been in the city for weeks, working on a project that had not gone the way she expected. Promises had been made. People she thought she could trust had turned away when things got difficult. It wasn't betrayal exactly, more like quiet abandonment. And that hurt more than she wanted to admit. She stared at the steam rising from her coffee, trying not to think too much, when the cafe door opened. The little bell above it chimed softly, and in walked a man with a calm presence. He wore a black jacket, his hair slightly messy from the rain. His steps were unhurried, his eyes scanning the room as if he was looking for someone he didn't want to miss. It was Keanu Reeves. Anna froze for a moment, not because he was famous, but because there was something about his presence. He didn't rush to the counter. He didn't pull out his phone. He just stood there for a moment, noticing people, acknowledging them with a small nod or a quiet smile. When his eyes met hers, he didn't look away quickly like most strangers do. He walked over, slowly, as if making sure it was the right thing to do. "Mind if I sit?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "It's fine." He sat across from her, resting his hands on the table, not touching his coffee yet. He didn't start talking about himself or ask the usual small-talk questions. Instead, he simply said, "You look like you've been carrying something heavy for a while." Anna blinked. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though the words felt hollow. "It's okay," he replied softly. "Sometimes people need someone to notice, even if they don't want to talk about it." She didn't know what to say. Strangers weren't supposed to notice, especially not strangers who could have walked past without a second thought. Before she could respond, the cafe door opened again. Another figure stepped in, shaking off the rain from her umbrella. Sandra Bullock. She spotted Keanu instantly, smiled warmly, and walked over. When she noticed Anna sitting there, she didn't hesitate. She greeted her as if they had already met. "You must be Anna," Sandra said with a tone that carried both kindness and certainty. "I've heard a lot about you." Anna raised an eyebrow. "About me?" "Yes," Sandra said simply, sliding into the seat beside Keanu. "Good things. Things that made me want to see for myself." Anna didn't understand. She had barely spoken to anyone in weeks. Who would be telling Sandra Bullock anything about her? Keanu looked at Anna and gave the smallest smile. "Sometimes good people talk about other good people, even if they think you won't hear it." Anna's first instinct was to doubt it. Life had taught her to be careful with praise. It often came before disappointment. But as she looked at them, she felt something unfamiliar in the air. It wasn't pity. It wasn't an act. It was the quiet, unshakable kind of kindness that asked for nothing in return. "You don't even know me," she said finally. Keanu leaned back slightly. "Then let's start knowing you." There was a pause. Not an awkward one, but the kind of pause where walls begin to shift, even if just a little. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, the air felt warmer. Anna realized she had a choice. She could keep her distance, pretend their kindness meant nothing, and leave before it got complicated. Or she could stay and see where this moment might lead. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the urge to run. Anna didn't leave that cafe right away. Instead, she found herself leaning back in her chair, listening more than speaking. Keanu and Sandra didn't push her with questions. They spoke in ways that invited her to join without pressure. Keanu talked about a book he had read years ago. Nothing glamorous, just a story about someone trying to find their place in the world. Sandra laughed about a moment from one of her early jobs where she had spilled coffee on the wrong person and ended up making a lifelong friend out of it. They told these things with an ease that felt rare to her, and yet Anna still kept a part of herself locked away. "You're quiet," Sandra said after a moment, not accusingly, but gently. "You don't have to be, though." Anna's fingers tapped the side of her coffee cup. "I don't talk much anymore. I used to. But then—" She trailed off. Keanu didn't ask her to finish the sentence. He just gave a small nod, as if to say, "That's enough for now." They sat together until the rain began to slow. As they stood to leave, Sandra glanced at Anna. "We're going to grab something to eat. You should come with us." Anna shook her head. "I don't want to intrude." "You wouldn't be," Sandra replied simply. "Sometimes it's good to not go back to an empty place right away." The words lingered. Anna thought of her apartment, the silence, the stillness, the way she had avoided even turning on the lights lately. She didn't answer right away, but when Keanu quietly held the cafe door open for her, she found herself stepping through. The restaurant was small, tucked away on a narrow street that smelled faintly of rain and fresh bread. They took a booth in the corner. There was no talk of fame or projects. They spoke about music, about food, about the way the city felt different when it rained. At one point, Sandra said, "People think kindness is something grand, but most of the time it's just staying long enough to listen." Anna looked at her, wondering if she was speaking about her. After the meal, Keanu offered to walk her home. She hesitated again, but finally agreed. The streets were slick with rain, the reflections of streetlights stretching along the pavement. "Can I say something?" Keanu asked as they walked. "Sure," Anna replied quietly. "I don't think you're broken," he said. "I think you've been carrying too much alone. There's a difference." The words made her chest tighten. She wanted to dismiss them, to protect herself from hope, but she couldn't. They sounded too much like the truth she had been avoiding. When they reached her building, she expected them to say goodbye and leave. But Sandra glanced up at the dim stairwell and asked, "Are you safe here?" "Yes," Anna said quickly. Sandra studied her for a moment. "Then we'll let you rest, but we'll see you again." They didn't ask for her number, and yet she somehow knew they meant it. Inside her apartment, Anna sat in the quiet, thinking about how strange the day had been. She had gone out expecting nothing but rain and solitude. Instead, two people who owed her nothing had chosen to sit with her, eat with her, and walk her home. And for the first time in weeks, she turned on the light. The next morning, Anna woke to the sound of rain again, softer this time, like a quiet echo of the night before. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The streets below were waking up, people hurrying with umbrellas, cars moving slowly through puddles. She watched them without really thinking, her mind still turning over the words Keanu had said. "I don't think you're broken. I think you've been carrying too much alone." No one had said something like that to her in years. She thought about messaging them somehow, but she didn't have their numbers. It was strange. Two people who had been so present in the moment had left without any way to reach them. Yet deep inside, she had a quiet certainty she would see them again. Around noon, there was a knock on her door. It startled her. She rarely had visitors, and she hadn't ordered anything. When she opened it, she froze. Standing there was Lucas. Lucas, with the easy smile she used to believe in. Lucas, who had left her without explanation when things got complicated months ago. Lucas, who now stood in front of her holding a paper bag with coffee and a croissant, as if nothing had happened. "Hey," he said softly, as though he had every right to be there. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by." Anna didn't move to let him in. "Why?" "Because—" He hesitated, looking down for a moment. "Because I heard you've been Not doing great. I wanted to check on you. She felt a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, the old pull of familiarity. Part of her wanted to slam the door. Another part of her wanted answers she'd never gotten. You left when I needed you, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I know, he admitted, and I was wrong. But maybe we could talk, even just for a minute. She let him in, but only because she didn't like the idea of her neighbors overhearing. He sat at her small table, setting the coffee in front of her like a peace offering. They talked, or rather, he talked, about how he had panicked, how he thought leaving would be better for her somehow, how he now realized he had been selfish. She listened without committing to believing him. But then he said something that made her pause. I saw you yesterday, he said, in that café with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock of all people. What's that about? Anna felt her shoulders tense. Nothing, they just sat with me. And walked you home? He raised an eyebrow. Look, I'm not saying they're bad people, but you barely know them. How do you know they actually care? The question landed heavier than it should have. Maybe because she had already asked herself the same thing last night, in the quiet. After Lucas left, she sat there for a long while. She didn't know if she was more unsettled by his sudden reappearance or by the seed of doubt he had planted. That evening, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hi, Anna. It's Sandra. We're meeting for coffee tomorrow afternoon. No pressure. But we'd like to see you. She stared at the screen. She thought about Lucas's warning. She thought about the warmth she had felt with them. And she knew she had to decide which voice she would listen to. The next day, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean under a pale silver sky. Anna stood in front of her mirror longer than usual. She wasn't dressing to impress, just a simple sweater and jeans, but something in her wanted to feel steady, maybe even strong. She walked to the café slowly, her thoughts caught between two feelings: the quiet comfort she had felt with Keanu and Sandra, and the unease Lucas had left behind. His words from yesterday still echoed in her head. How do you know they actually care? When she stepped inside, Sandra was already there, sitting at the same corner table from before. Keanu sat across from her, leaning slightly forward as they spoke. They both looked up when they saw Anna, their expressions soft but genuinely glad. You came, Sandra said warmly. I did, Anna replied, sliding into the seat. They talked for a while, about nothing and everything. Sandra shared a funny story about getting lost on the subway once, while Keanu mentioned a small bookstore he thought Anna might like. The ease returned, little by little, and she felt herself unclenching. Then the cafe door opened. Lucas walked in. He spotted her instantly, and for a brief second, his expression froze. Not angry, not surprised, but something sharper. He walked over, ignoring the curious glance Keanu gave him. Anna, Lucas said, standing at the edge of the table. Can we talk? Anna's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I'm in the middle of something. It'll just take a minute, he insisted, glancing at Keanu and Sandra like they were intruders. I think you should hear me out. Away from, he gestured vaguely, this. Sandra leaned back slightly, her gaze steady. She doesn't have to go anywhere she doesn't want to. Lucas looked at her, then at Keanu, and his voice dropped. You barely know them, Anna. Don't you think it's strange they just showed up in your life? The air in the cafe felt heavier. A few customers glanced over, sensing tension. Anna's heart pounded. She could feel the old pull toward Lucas, the part of her that used to follow, used to explain herself. But she also remembered how it had felt last night, sitting in the light instead of the dark. Keanu's voice was quiet but steady. Anna, you don't owe anyone an explanation. Not to me, not to Sandra, not to him. You just owe yourself honesty. Lucas looked at her expectantly, almost daring her to choose. Anna took a slow breath. Lucas, I'm not leaving this table. He blinked, as if he hadn't prepared for that answer. I appreciate you checking in, she continued, but I'm staying. Lucas's jaw tightened. He hesitated, then turned and left, the little bell above the café door ringing behind him. Silence lingered for a moment before Sandra smiled gently. That was brave. It didn't feel brave, Anna said. It just felt necessary. That's usually what real bravery feels like, Keanu replied. And for the first time, Anna felt something shift inside her, not because she had chosen them over Lucas, but because she had chosen herself. The cafe slowly settled back into its usual rhythm after Lucas left. The low hum of conversation returned, and the faint smell of fresh pastries drifted from the counter. But Anna's pulse still ran fast, and she could feel the heat in her cheeks. Sandra didn't rush to fill the silence. She just reached for her cup, took a slow sip, and waited. Keanu's eyes stayed on Anna, not in a way that made her feel cornered, but in a way that made her feel seen. Finally, Anna set her cup down and exhaled. There's something I haven't told you. Sandra leaned in slightly. You don't have to, unless you want to. I do, Anna said. Her voice was low but steady. Because yesterday, Lucas said you barely know me, and he's right. You don't. But if I'm going to keep meeting you like this, I don't want you to think I'm someone I'm not. Keanu nodded, wordlessly encouraging her to go on. Anna looked down at her hands. 3 years ago, I trusted the wrong people. It wasn't just Lucas. It was a group of friends, people I worked with. There was a project, something I believed in, something we were building together. But then there was a fight, a betrayal. They said things about me that weren't true, and She paused, her voice tightening. I let it break me. I walked away from everything, from work, from people, from myself. She could feel their quiet attention. It didn't feel like judgment. It felt like a space she could finally speak into. Since then, she continued, I've been careful, too careful. I avoid new people. I don't let anyone get too close, because if they leave, or worse, if they stay and hurt me, it's easier if they don't really know me in the first place. Sandra reached across the table, resting her hand lightly on Anna's. That's not weakness. That's survival. But survival isn't the same as living. Anna swallowed, the words hitting deeper than she expected. Keanu added quietly, and sometimes, the people who deserve to know you are the ones who stay, even when you push them away. Anna felt her throat tighten. You're both so sure about people. No, Sandra said with a small smile. We're just willing to give them a chance. That's different. They sat in that quiet understanding for a while. Then Sandra glanced at her watch. Come with us tonight. There's something we want you to see. Anna raised an eyebrow. What is it? Not telling, Sandra replied with a hint of mischief. But it's not a party, and it's not work. It's just something real. Keanu smiled. Trust us. And for reasons she couldn't explain, Anna found herself nodding. That night, they would take her somewhere unexpected, a place that would show her more about them and about herself than any conversation could. And it would set in motion a moment she wouldn't forget. Anna almost changed her mind twice before she left her apartment that evening. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the old habit of retreating, of convincing herself it was easier to stay home where nothing could surprise her. But then she remembered Sandra's hand on hers in the cafe, the way Keanu had said, trust us without pushing. So she put on her coat and stepped out into the cool night air. They met her on a quiet street, neither of them dressed for anything formal. Keanu wore a simple dark sweater, Sandra in a jacket and scarf. They didn't explain where they were going, just walked beside her through streets that grew narrower, quieter. After 10 minutes, they stopped in front of a low brick building with soft yellow light spilling from the windows. Inside, she could hear faint music. Not loud, not polished, but warm and human. When they stepped in, Anna saw it wasn't a restaurant or theater. It was a community center. The main hall was filled with folding chairs, mismatched tables, and people of all ages. Some were serving food, others playing guitars, a few laughing over a board game in the corner. "What is this?" Anna asked quietly. "This," Sandra said, "is where we come when we need to remember what matters." Keanu added, "No cameras, no spotlight, just people showing up for each other." They moved through the room, greeting people who clearly knew them, not as celebrities, but as friends who had been here before. A woman in her 70s hugged Sandra. A young man with a guitar clasped Keanu's hand. No one seemed surprised to see them. Anna found herself sitting at a table with 3 strangers who offered her a bowl of soup without asking her name. The music in the background was soft and imperfect, and somehow that made it more beautiful. At one point, she asked Sandra, "Why bring me here?" "Because," Sandra said, "kindness is easy to doubt when it comes from people you think have no reason to give it. I wanted you to see that this isn't about who you are in the world. It's about being here, in the moment, and choosing to care anyway." Keanu leaned in slightly. "You don't have to believe in everyone right away. But maybe you can start by believing in one moment like this." Anna looked around. She saw a teenage girl laughing as an older man taught her a card trick. She saw 2 people she didn't know helping someone fix a broken chair. Nothing here was perfect, but it was good. And for the first time in a long while, she let her shoulders relax. When they left, the night air was cool against her face. The city lights seemed softer, less distant. They walked her to her building without talking much, the kind of silence that felt full instead of empty. At her door, Anna turned to them. "Thank you for not giving up when I didn't make it easy." Sandra smiled. "You're worth the patience." Keanu added, "We'll see you soon. You know where to find us now." They walked away, their figures slowly disappearing down the quiet street. Anna stepped inside her apartment, turned on the light, and for the first time in months, opened the curtains. The rain had stopped, and so had the part of her that believed kindness couldn't be trusted.